So it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A13 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2025. Now, the big thing I can definitely tell you in my personal opinion is that if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, it genuinely does make a lot of sense to go through and buy something. The Samsung Galaxy A13 is a good phone, but there might be better phones out there for you. So we'll go and take a look at this phone and compare it against all the competition. First things first though, if you do want to pick up some phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy A13, this particular phone on the front side is essentially going to be giving you a very good sized 6.6 inch PLS LCD panel. Now, this phone came out back in 2022. But even for a 2022 phone, most phones were already kind of like in the OLED side. But here's the biggest takeaway. This phone was essentially, it's not a super expensive device. It wasn't a phone that was like costing you, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It was a very, very cheap budget phone. So because of that, you're going to have to remember that you're not supposed to be really comparing this phone against kind of that type of competition against the iPhone 16s or something. You're actually more so supposed to be comparing it against something like a Samsung Galaxy, A25 or Samsung Galaxy A23 or one of those types of phones from 2022. So that's a really big thing to keep in mind here. You're getting a little bit of bezel at the bottom. You're getting this Infinity U display. So that's always something really nice to basically have there. It's really not that great of a panel. It's pretty basic as far as you could tell. So that is kind of one of those things to keep in mind there. But I would still probably tell you for the most part, looking out on the exterior, it still is a pretty good looking phone. And I think there's not really that much to hate on here. But like I said, it's not an OLED display. It's an LCD panel and it's 60 Hertz. It's not giving you any refresh rate higher than that. That can be kind of an annoying thing when it kind of comes down to it. You are getting USB Type-C on this particular phone, which is always nice to have. You're also going through and getting a microSD card slot inside of this phone too. So this is in and of itself a really nice thing to have. I personally love having USB Type-C, but I love having a microSD card slot more. And being able to go through and get a microSD card slot inside of this phone is something that is genuinely so cool. And I, for one, I just love having this phone when it comes down to it from that side. Now, when it comes down to the rest of the body, like I said, this was supposed to be kind of like a cheap budget phone. So this phone is basically completely built out of plastic. There's not really anything like super insane going on here. It's a pretty basic type of layout. So I definitely kind of run that through your head as well, that this is going to be somewhat of a basic type of layout for the most part. So if you're planning on buying this phone and expecting it to, give you a really great experience from that side, this might not be the phone for you. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way because that is, once again, one of those big things to kind of keep in mind there from that particular side. Now on the back side, it is a plastic back. It's kind of this reflective back though, so it does actually look pretty good. So just kind of keep that in mind. And overall, if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, I genuinely do think that this type of device looks very good, right? It looks very good and it looks good for what the type of device it is. But again, I wouldn't necessarily go through and like pick up this device if you're planning on going through and having a phone if you're trying to compare it against like a majority of competition nowadays, this might not be the phone for you. So just kind of keep that in mind. On top of that though, when it comes down to basically that next step of its price tag, this phone as of this point is going to be costing you about $85-ish. So once again, it's not going to be like the most expensive phone of all time, but it's not going to be like the cheapest either, because I feel like even for like around that $100 price range, if you can go up to maybe like $120 to $150, you can probably get a way better device than this thing too. So that's just another one of those minor things to keep in mind. I genuinely don't think it's the biggest deal in the world, but that could be one thing to keep in mind there when it comes down to it. From the camera standpoint, this phone was very interesting because it was basically giving you this like quadruple camera setup on the backside. So it's giving you a 50 megapixel wide, 5 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro, and 2 megapixel depth camera. A lot of those camera lenses don't really mean that much if I'm being honest. They're pretty much same old, nothing super insane going on here either as far as I can tell. They are basically giving you 1080p at 30 frames per second on the front side and on the back side. So this is one of those key areas where you would probably end up taking a look at, and you're going to have to kind of think to yourself like, hey, there might be a better type of device to go and pick up rather than this thing. Like, I feel like with this type of device, it looks great. I like the way it looks and everything. It's a good looking phone, but I would probably tell you there might be better options out there than buying this particular one when it comes down to it too. Because the camera itself really isn't that great. You're probably going to be getting somewhat of like a limited type of experience because you're not even getting 4K at 60 on the front. So I would definitely tell you from that side, this thing, looks great, but there might be better options out there for you, in my personal opinion as well. Now, on top of that, when it does kind of come down to another area of this phone, like the software longevity, this is another one of those really big things to keep in mind here. This type of device, for the most part, is kind of putting you in a situation where you're not really going to be getting a device that's going to be like, lasting for that much longer. This phone ended up getting Android 13, and that's pretty much it. So it didn't end up lasting for like a super long amount of time, which is already kind of a disadvantage. But on top of that, if you're planning on getting this phone and using it on an everyday basis, that's really not going to be that great of an experience either. So that right there is going to be a little bit of a problem there. And I do feel like if you're going to go through and buy this phone, this is going to be one of those types of issues you might end up experiencing. So that right there in and of itself, I would definitely recommend you to kind of keep that in the back of your head, that if you're planning on getting a phone, just kind of keep that in mind, that this type of device, it might be on its last leg of software by the time you buy it, and there might be better options out there for you before you go through and basically pick up this device. So once again, I just kind of wanted you to kind of think about that when it kind of comes down to it as well. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to its battery, this phone is basically giving you a 5,000 milliamp hour battery inside of it. So pretty decent sized battery, right? It's a big sized battery actually. And this phone, for the most part, that was one of its biggest advantages, was basically going through giving you a phone that was going to be giving you like a pretty good experience when it comes down to that battery life, standpoint. So that was always something that was very nice going on for this phone. So once again, I feel like if you're going to go through and pick up a device, that could be somewhat of an advantage of going through and picking up a phone like this when it comes down to it as well. And finally, when it comes down to the performance, this phone is basically giving you that Exynos 850 chipset inside with 3, 4, or 6 gigs of RAM. So there was a humongous amount of RAM you could kind of specify this thing with. So you can go up or down or sideways depending on how much you want to go up and down with. So I feel like this in and of itself could be one of those other areas of this type of phone where you could look at and be kind of happy with, because it's definitely, it's not a good performing phone. I'm going to be honest, right? It's really not that good. But with that being said, if you're getting a phone like this, you probably already know it's not going to be that great of a performing device. It's very glitchy, just glitches all over the place. It's really not that great of a performing device. So just kind of keep that in mind, which is exactly why I'd recommend kind of going through and picking up some other devices. So in this day and age, there are far better phones you can go through and pick up rather than the Samsung Galaxy A13. If you're going to go through and pick up a device, I genuinely do think that a phone like a Samsung Galaxy S21, which is maybe only like $50 more expensive than this thing, is a way better device to go and pick up rather than this device. It just doesn't make any sense to go through and buy this type of phone when there are way better phones to go and buy rather than this thing. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way. I feel like these types of phones, they come and go with a lot of the A series. They're good for the most part, but they typically don't, give you the longest lifespan for the most part. And I feel like that's kind of the main issue you're going to be experiencing with something like the Samsung Galaxy A13. So as of this point, I do feel like if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, there's probably going to be some better options out there. And that's why I probably wouldn't really recommend buying this type of phone when it comes down to it. I'd recommend buying something like a Galaxy S21, S21 Plus, S22, those types of phones I'd rather recommend buying than this one. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.